Okay, for the last question, I started losing my wind block for the camera, so I figured I'd just kind of move it out in a little more shelter. So the last question was from ProBman5, and it's a multi-parter. He starts out by saying, what drove you to live the homestead life? Well, it's kind of like what I alluded to before, like self-sufficient living, just having a little more freedom to do what I want. In regard to gardening and livestock and different things like that. I'm rural, but I'm still close to town by 30 minutes or so, so I can still have most of the same conveniences. But it's basically just my desire to be able to walk out on my front porch and not run into somebody else's wall. And I like having a little bit of that freedom, the peace and the quiet. I like to be able to see the stars. Just different things like that. And I enjoy being able to do for myself in a lot of respects. And I'm able to do that, living in a little more rural area and, taking responsibility for some of the things that we do. Not to say that we don't enjoy the community or conveniences of towns or anything like that, but that's kind of the gist of it. So the next question is pretty easy one actually to answer, but it's kind of complex. So he says, how much money would you say is sufficient enough for one to start their own homestead, as my wife and I plan on doing so in the near future? We have saved a lot to avoid stupid costs in the long run, such as interest on a solar system and versus just buying it outright, no mortgage on our home, etc. Well, I think you guys are definitely on the right track. Living a debt-free life is huge. That is my goal. One of my goals is to pay off this house, but just stay debt-free. But as far as the amount of money, it's pretty simple. Like just on the face value, there's really no right amount of money. Because say you were living in a very expensive area like New York City or LA, or very close to a place with high taxes and gas and fuel and electricity, everything's expensive. It's going to cost you quite a bit more to live versus if you lived in rural Alaska or Kansas or places where maybe there's not as many job opportunities, but property taxes are low and there's just literally buying land or buying anything is cheaper. Food is cheaper in some respects. So basically it just depends on where you want to go, and I don't recommend one place over another. If a person likes this city and they want to have kind of a homestead life, and maybe they don't grow gardening stuff, but maybe they build stuff in their condo and develop an income that way, that's still kind of that same style of life. But I would say it depends on where you are. And it sounds like you guys have a good head on your shoulders. I guess if you were going to start, say, in a rural area, if you built a very small house or got a manufactured home or even started out in a travel trailer, you could really build stuff as you needed it and do virtually everything debt-free, and slowly grow into your homestead or whatever you're trying to, your eventual goal is, versus mortgaging $500,000 and then, praying that you don't lose your job to be able to pay for it all. So anyway, I hope that's as good a question. If it's not, ask it again and I'll answer it in the next video. The next one is, any mistakes that you have made starting your homestead and that you would like to share with others so they do not make the same ones? Okay, this is another multi-parter. I've made lots of mistakes. That's just, I guess, the nature of life. One of the things I would say is some things I have underplanned on. I've just kind of like, I'll just do it, like my garden, for instance. I have gone to really high raised beds into sunken ground beds to now the kind of mid-level beds that I have. Whereas if I would have done a little more research rather than just trying different things, however, I do like to just try random things sometimes. So part of that's just my personality. I like to experiment. But then on other things, I've way overplanned and made something so complex that I never really even got started on it, or it took extremely long to get started on it. So I guess it's that Goldilocks rule, you know, somewhere in the middle. Don't under or over plan. Another one of the things I did want to point out is our house, we built it ourselves. We acted as the general contractor, so we didn't do everything ourselves. But instead of having a home builder build it for us, we purchased the land and we got a loan and we acted as the contractor. So in that process, there were certain things that I knew from the get-go that I wanted to hire out, and there were certain things that I wanted to do myself. Well, one of the things I wanted to do myself was to put concrete countertops in our kitchen. You can make them cheaply and customly, and I think they look really cool. Well, I got caught up in being paranoid about not making certain schedules that the bank and the county permit process had set forth through our permitting process. And I got scared that I wasn't going to meet a deadline, and I finally just said, let's just buy some countertops. And we did, and we made the schedules, and in the long run, we ended up getting done with our house probably 3 months early or thereabouts. But I look back, and I think the amount of money I would have spent on those concrete countertops and the enjoyment of actually making them and the pride of having done it versus purchasing the ones that were several $1,000s more, I wish I would have done that. So I guess it goes on to that over and under planning thing. Just really evaluate each project before you do it, but don't over evaluate. Next question. How does the rest of your family enjoy the homestead life, especially your daughter? As I have a son, and I don't know if the homestead life is best for a child, yet he will go to school and do sports and activities like any other child. Well, I would say they like it. My wife grew up in a rural area. I grew up half of my upbringing in a rural area. And I can say it's not much different than any other. I mean, versus if you decided to homeschool your kid, I think you would really have to go out of your way to introduce social activities for them. And I think either way is fine. But my daughter, you know, she still goes to town. She still goes shopping. She still goes and has play dates. It's just maybe she doesn't have a neighbor right next door that she can do it with. So it's a little more effort on our part. But, you know, growing up, she's still going to go to school and go to movies and go to parties, and she'll still have friends over. So I would say it's pretty much the same as any other kid. And we don't plan on living like recluses or anything like that. So I hope that answered that question pretty much. I think you'll enjoy the freedom to do what you want, but, you know, so long as you're not 4 hours from the nearest city, you know, you're going to live pretty much a similar lifestyle with just a little bit more freedom around your house. And if you would suggest one do-it-yourself homestead project for anyone to do, what would it be and why? Well, this one is pretty simple. If I had to tell somebody to pick one thing, I would say start a garden or do some sort of small livestock like chickens or rabbits or something that maybe you're interested in. Because both of those projects entail multiple things. If you do a garden like me, you might have to build a fence or build raised beds or build a watering system. So you're getting construction aspects. If you're same thing for like livestock, building a chicken coop or maybe a rabbit hutch. So you get some construction, I guess, values going. Next, you have to work on planning your plants, when they're going to be watered, when you're going to feed the animals, sourcing materials, you know, and just in the responsibility of taking care of all those things, maintaining them and doing those kind of things. So I would say either one of those would be a great first or primary project because they lead into so many other skill sets to be successful at them. And then the last question is, what future plans or future technologies do you plan to implement on your homestead that you think that will help you out more efficiently? Well, I've got several, but one of the bigger ones that I'm thinking about doing is a sunken greenhouse that takes advantage of some of the you know, the heat from the earth in the winter to grow things. As well as saves on some materials, so I don't have all the walls, just pretty much a roof. I would eventually like to do solar, but right now it's just we can't afford it. And there's no rebates in our area, so that would be the other one. And then maybe some other rainwater catchments other than the system I already have in place. Okay, so I thought I was done, but there's one last question I did want to answer, and it was from Cokeman250. He'd asked two questions. One was what I was drinking. I answered that earlier in the video, but he had more of a serious question, and it was, what is a large goal that you're working toward on the homestead? Well, I think I kind of answered that with some of the larger projects that I do want to accomplish in the next year or so, but I'll answer this one just more on a general sense. And basically a large goal for my homestead is to just make it more of a like a homestead of the past, something that produces for me and my family in multiple ways. You know, like the old homesteaders, they would run cattle or grow crops or manufacture things. Well, ultimately, you know, if I ever lost my job, I would hope that I have gotten my home and my property up to a point where you know, I'm producing more food, and on the other note, maybe producing something that can provide a secondary source of income, whether it's projects that I'm selling on Craigslist or you know, anything else, you know, providing off-grid energy in maybe a hopes for a future solar system. So anyway, I hope that wasn't too generic, but I did want to answer that kind of more in an overall sense rather than just saying a project that I'm looking for or working towards. So anyway, I really appreciate all of your questions. Ask any more, just put it in the comments below. You know, maybe we'll have another one, or maybe I was too long-winded and nobody will answer or ask any more questions. In fear that I will answer them too long or too lengthfully. So I don't even know if that's a word. But anyway, thanks guys. I always appreciate your views and your comments, and keep the questions coming, and we'll see you next time.